To listen ad-free, visit sinspod.co/subscribe. Starting at $2.99 a month, you'll also get access to our exclusive bonus content episodes when you join through Patreon or Apple subscriptions. Thanks for supporting the show.
Every year, countless people worldwide vanish without a trace, leaving behind loved ones desperate for answers. I'm Jason Usry, the host of Missing in a Moment, a true crime podcast. In each episode, we'll explore the crucial moments when someone goes missing, shed light on the stories of those left searching, and amplify the voices of their families, advocates, and heroes who refuse to give up hope. Missing in a Moment, a true crime podcast, out now wherever you listen. Remember, just because someone goes missing in a moment doesn't mean their memory can't live forever.
Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Like many women we talk about on Sins and Survivors, Esmerelda Gonzalez was on the rise in 2019. She was successful and getting more popular all the time. She was a model, an Instagram influencer, a college graduate, and just a savvy woman whose friends and even her ex-boyfriend agreed was destined for greatness.
Tragically, of course, it was not to be. Her bright light was snuffed out by a violent man who saw her only for what she was wearing, not who she was. He and his accomplices committed a horrific act and then worked very hard to try and cover up the evidence. If it wasn't for our great community here in Las Vegas and the tips police received, they might have gotten away with it.
Hi, and welcome to Sins and Survivors, a Las Vegas true crime podcast, where we focus on cases that deal with domestic violence as well as missing persons and unsolved cases. I'm your host, Sean, and with me, as always, is the one and only John.
I am the only John in the room.
It's hard to believe, but this is the last episode of season 1. Over the past year, we have done more than 45 regular episodes. Next week, we'll start Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we have a bunch of extra episodes planned for October, some collaborations we're excited about, and some special episodes from our friends in the ethical true crime community. So make sure you are following all of our social media accounts at Sins and Survivors, and that you are subscribed on your podcast platform of choice so you don't miss a single thing as we work to raise awareness of this critical issue that plagues not only Las Vegas, but as we always say, happens everywhere. But let's get to the case we have for this week. The Gonzalez family came to the United States with their young family in the late 90s from Michoacan, Mexico, searching for opportunities for themselves and their 3 children, and they moved to, where else but Las Vegas. They moved to the historic West Side and raised their children there. What we know about Esmerelda's personality comes mainly from her older brother, Juan, who she was very close with. In remembrance of his sister, Juan describes her so beautifully, so we're going to read what he had to say about her on the family's GoFundMe. He says, "I would like to tell you about the real Esmerelda Gonzalez, my kind, beautiful, and educated sister, who was deeply loved by her family and friends. Esmerelda was a 24-year-old student at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where she was working towards her Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication Studies. Esmerelda loved to spoil her white poodle Bonita, who she rescued from an animal shelter 11 years ago. She was a very savvy chess player who competed in her high school chess club. She was a member of UNLV's chapter of the National Society for Leadership and Success, where she learned to strengthen her leadership skills. She enjoyed going out to eat with her friends and family, and she loved to make us laugh. She dreamed of one day having a family of her own, and despite having mental health challenges, Esmeralda was always determined to strive for success." He also said that Christmas didn't start until she arrived, and that she was always working, always busy. She also participated in beauty pageants, which isn't very surprising given how beautiful, smart, and talented she was.
Juan also said that she had dreams of becoming a lawyer after participating in the Trial by Peers program run by the Clark County Law Foundation as a peer counselor. This is a really innovative program that is used as an alternative for some first and second time misdemeanor juvenile offenders. In the program, defendants are represented by peer counselors who prosecute and defend their case, while a jury of their peers hears the trial. The teen jury decides the verdict, and if the defendant is found guilty, they also determine the sentence. Sentence completion results in the defendant's record reflecting only a referral to peer court. Sentencing options may include serving on a jury, performing community service, writing apology letters, or attending professional development courses. We mentioned she was a professional model and Instagram influencer, and she had over 300,000 followers. You can see her whole Instagram feed at Esmerelda_Merlot, and you quickly get the sense that she was blowing up on social media, really making a name for herself and living her best life here in Las Vegas, sporting a $40,000 Rolex, wearing designer shoes, carrying designer bags, and even buying her first house at age 23. So she was definitely finding success and making it work as a career. As Juan said, she was a hard worker, always striving for success. Esmerelda was born on May 26, 1995, and just after her 24th birthday, she mysteriously disappeared without a trace. On May 31, 2019, her boyfriend, Luis Merlot, called Juan to tell him that Esmerelda was acting strangely. After that, Juan went over to her house to check on her and was immediately very concerned at what he found. Her front door was unlocked, which was extremely unlike Esmerelda, who valued her privacy and security. The lights were on, and he said that it looked as if the place had been ransacked.
We mentioned this before, but according to Juan, Esmerelda suffered from mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and she was on medication to treat it. Juan has said that she was fine while she was on her medication, but when he saw the state of her house, he was concerned that she may have stopped taking her medication, which he knew could lead to erratic behavior. Juan leapt into action. He reported her missing to Metro, printing flyers and canvassing the neighborhood to find out if anyone had seen his sister. It was a frustrating and terrifying time for her family, not knowing where Esmerelda was. When the police began their investigation, of course, they canvassed the neighborhood looking for information, and several people in the neighborhood came forward with footage from their doorbell and security cameras that offered clues about the last time Esmerelda was seen. On May 30th, 2019, there was surveillance footage of Esmeralda walking around the neighborhood in lingerie and high heels. She was walking through the neighborhood, seemingly pretty unsteady on her feet, talking to people. Further investigation revealed that she was asking people for a ride to BMW of Las Vegas so she could get a replacement key fob for her car. In her last interaction with Luis, her boyfriend, he claimed that he had taken her car keys and phone out of concern for her well-being to make sure she didn't drive in the state she was in.
Police then paid a visit to the BMW dealership and got their security camera footage, and sure enough, there she was in the same outfit, accompanied by a man who was unknown to Juan. He'd never seen the person who was with his sister before. Metro attempted to locate him as a person of interest. They described him as suspicious and focused on bringing him in for questioning. The lead was a dead end, though. It turned out he wasn't at all suspicious. His name was Brent Smith, and he was just a nice person who lived in the neighborhood and offered to drive her to the BMW dealership to get her key fob replaced. And we'll have a bit more to say about that in our Swing Shift episode after this. Police also did some digging into her boyfriend, Luis Merlot, who had taken her keys and phone, but they discovered there had been a domestic disturbance at their house recently, which obviously made them want to investigate that angle further, given the statistics that we talk about so often. Police were able to view the surveillance video from inside her house, where she could be seen alone that evening, walking around the house and then leaving, so Metro cleared Luis as a suspect at that point as well. He was nowhere to be seen. She was last seen on a doorbell camera around 2:30 a.m. on the 31st of May, when she rang a neighbor's doorbell and they told her she was at the wrong house, and she just apologized and walked away. On the surveillance camera, you can clearly see that she's quite unsteady on her feet, and she seems like she might be in some sort of distress.
At this point in the investigation, the police need to catch a break. They had pursued both Brent from the car dealership and Esmeralda's boyfriend as possible leads, but neither was responsible for her disappearance and neither of them had any details that would get Juan and the police closer to finding Esmerelda. On July 18, 2019, Metro detectives got an anonymous tip that was very specific, but also very horrifying and almost difficult to accept as true. The tipster told police that two of the tipster's acquaintances, a man named Christopher Prestopino and a woman named Cassandra Grant, had killed a woman. They didn't know the name of the woman, but they had heard that the woman had been tied up in Christopher's house and later killed by being injected with a pool cleaner chemical. Christopher and Cassandra then rented a U-Haul truck and left the woman's body in the desert. Metro detectives looked into the tip, trying to corroborate what the tipster had told them. They looked into whether or not Christopher or Cassandra had rented a U-Haul recently, and they found a U-Haul record from June 8, 2019. Christopher had rented a 15-foot truck and returned it 2 days later. The detectives then looked into missing person reports to see if anyone had been reported missing during that time. As we mentioned, Esmerelda was reported missing on May 31st, 2019. Metro became more confident that the tipster could be telling the truth when they realized that Christopher lived down the street from Esmerelda, not more than 1/10 of a mile from her home. Christopher was in his mid-40s and worked as a stagehand at the Paris Hotel and did not have any violent criminal history. Cassandra, his roommate, was in her late 30s. The police also had the name of Christopher's girlfriend, Lisa Mort. Lisa was 32 years old and had recently been arrested on unrelated drug charges and was housed in the Clark County Detention Center.
As we stated earlier, Esmerelda had been caught on her neighbor's doorbell camera walking around the neighborhood around 2:30 a.m. on May 31st, 2019. The police had a theory that maybe she had walked into Christopher's house or that maybe she had an encounter with Cassandra in the neighborhood. Police felt they had enough to take a harder look at Christopher and Cassandra at that point. They spoke to a friend of Christopher's named Tricia. Tricia was upfront with the officers and gave them the details of what she knew. She told them that in early June, Christopher had called her and asked her for help. She went over to his house, and she was able to see that he had rented that U-Haul and that in his garage was a cement mixer and a large, apparently homemade wooden box. He wanted her to help him move the large wooden crate into the U-Haul, but it was too heavy and the two were not able to move it. His roommate, Cassandra, was also in the garage, according to Tricia, and she said that Cassandra was whacked out of her mind, so I assume that means she thought she was high, and she was cleaning the garage furiously. She also said that Christopher was acting extremely paranoid and told her that there had been a woman at his house and that she started freaking out, so he had tied her up, and that he thought maybe he had killed her. But Tricia didn't see any woman or a body at the house.
The police continued to gather evidence about Christopher and Cassandra. They looked into local Home Depot stores and got surveillance footage of Christopher buying incriminating items such as wood, lime, building materials, concrete, and screws on June 6th. They were also able to get a search warrant for his phone records, which showed that he had been out in the desert for several hours on June 8th. Police questioned Christopher, but he claimed that he didn't recognize Esmerelda from the photos police showed him. He denied having any knowledge of anything about her disappearance. Cassandra, who at the time was staying in Milwaukee, also denied knowing anything about Esmerelda or what had happened to her. According to police, she was defensive and argumentative during the interview. The police then went to the jail where Christopher's girlfriend Lisa was being held. Like Christopher and Cassandra, she claimed she didn't know anything about what happened. But shortly after the police left, she called Christopher and warned him that the police had come to question her, and she told him to run. I guess she forgot that all the calls from jail are recorded.
Cassandra apparently was also talking to her friends about the police coming to question her. According to the police report, at least 3 different friends of hers came forward to the police with information she had told them. One mutual friend of the group told police that she had spoken to Cassandra shortly after the police came to Milwaukee. Cassandra told her friend that she hadn't recognized the woman in the photos police showed her, but there had been a woman in the house she shared with Christopher. She said that there was a period of time when he wouldn't let her come into the house. She also told her friend that she had seen construction materials at the house, but Chris said that he was building an island in the kitchen, which she said she found odd because the kitchen already had an island. She then left Las Vegas to go to New Orleans with her daughter. Another friend of the group heard similar details from Cassandra, including that Cassandra and Christopher were worried because they had left a U-Haul dolly in the desert near the body. This friend also didn't know the identity of the victim, but she believed that Christopher was in the process of selling his possessions and moving. The details of what Cassandra shared had happened to Esmeralda were graphic and horrifying. It's unclear how she came to be inside Christopher's house on the 31st, but Cassandra told multiple friends that the woman began freaking out at some point. Christopher tied her up and tried to get her to calm down. Cassandra stated that she was speaking in the devil's tongue, whatever that's supposed to mean. He was afraid she was going to go to the police and report him for something, presumably kidnapping her and or giving her drugs. At one point, she did calm down, and she fought back and punched him in the face when he untied her. Esmeralda was beaten and strangled, and eventually she was killed by an injection of muriatic acid. Some sources state that Cassandra admitted she had injected Esmeralda, but others state that it was Chris. On September 20th, 2019, Metro Police executed a search warrant on Chris's home, but no additional evidence was uncovered.
After hearing from several friends the details that Cassandra had shared with them about what had happened with Esmeralda, the detectives offered her a deal. If she would come back to Vegas and help them locate Esmeralda's body, they would not place her under arrest immediately. They would allow her to return to Milwaukee to get her affairs in order before placing her under arrest. Cassandra led police to a spot in the desert near the rural community of Glendale in the Moapa Valley, 50 miles northeast of Vegas. There, the police found a large structure, a 250-gallon water tank that had been filled with concrete. They excavated the concrete and found human remains inside. Sadly, Esmeralda's body had significantly decomposed, and her official cause of death could not be determined. They were able to positively identify her through DNA, as well as through the belongings she still had with her, including her $40,000 Rolex. Apparently, Christopher had listened to his girlfriend and fled because he was discovered to have been in Belize, but he was planning to travel back home to Las Vegas because Lisa, his girlfriend, was getting out of jail, and he was planning to pick her up and take her back to Belize with him. Officers were there to arrest him when his flight from Belize landed in Vegas.
Cassandra and Lisa were arrested shortly afterward. Both Christopher and Cassandra were charged with murder, kidnapping resulting in substantial bodily harm, and conspiracy to commit murder. Lisa was charged with accessory to murder after warning Christopher that detectives were investigating Esmeralda's death. Christopher originally pleaded not guilty and was released on $500,000 bail. However, District Judge Michelle Levitt ordered his arrest after he failed to appear in court. He was taken into custody within hours of that order. Pamela Weckerly, as a prosecutor, said he was flagrantly violating his bail by contacting his girlfriend Lisa in jail and asked that he be held without bail. In October of 2020, he was remanded into the care of a mental health facility as he was found to be temporarily incompetent to stand trial. He was in that facility's care for about 4 months before he was sent back to the district court for trial. There were, of course, as always, additional delays in reaching a trial date, but in March of 2023, Christopher accepted a plea deal. He entered an Alford plea to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. As a reminder, an Alford plea means that he's admitting that the prosecution has enough evidence to find him guilty, but he is not technically admitting his guilt. He was sentenced to 10 to 25 years, with credit for nearly 3 years of time served. At the time of his sentence, Christopher blamed Esmeralda's death on Cassandra and claimed all of his involvement was after the fact. He did seem somewhat remorseful, but he really didn't take responsibility for his actions. His first parole hearing will be held in 2029.
Lisa Mort, Christopher's girlfriend, pleaded guilty to being an accessory to murder and was sentenced in 2020 to 2 to 5 years in prison. She was released on parole in December of 2020. Cassandra pleaded guilty as well to voluntary manslaughter with a deadly weapon in 2021, and she was sentenced to 8 to 20 years. According to reporting, she wrote a 5-page letter to the judge before sentencing, where she accepted responsibility for all of the charges. She stated she was dealing with substance use during that time and that she struggled with what she could have or should have done, but didn't admit to killing Esmeralda. Her next parole hearing will be in 2027. If she is not paroled, her sentence will end in November of 2030. As always, John and I will be talking more about our thoughts on this case in our Swing Shift episode, so be sure to visit sinspod.co/subscribe to sign up to hear all of our bonus episodes.
Esmerelda's family and friends gathered for a celebration of life for her on November 12th, 2019. This is another tragic story of a young woman in the Las Vegas community being taken by violence. We agree with what the trial judge said at Christopher's sentencing. Esmerelda sounds like she was a wonderful person, and we're grateful to her brother Juan for giving her a voice. We would like to remind everyone of the resources that are available. You can find links in our show notes and on our website to the national hotlines for domestic violence and stalking. The number to text or call for a mental health crisis is 988. We want to thank everyone again for all of your support of our podcast over this past year. We are really grateful for the opportunities we have had to share more about the victims who are all more than just what happened to them, and to shed light on cases of injustice in our community, and to help support families who are still searching for their missing loved ones. So until next week, remember what happens here happens everywhere.
Thanks for listening. Visit sinspod.co/subscribe for exclusive bonus content and to listen ad-free. Remember to like and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Threads at Sins and Survivors. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. You can contact us at questions@sinsandsurvivors.com.
If you or someone you know is affected by domestic violence or needs support, please reach out to local resources or the National Domestic Violence Hotline. A list of resources is available on our website, sinsandsurvivors.com. Sins and Survivors, a Las Vegas true crime podcast, is researched, written, and produced by your hosts, Sean and John. The information shared in this podcast is accurate at the time of recording. If you have questions, concerns, or corrections, please email us. Links to source material for this episode can be found on our website, sinsandsurvivors.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast creators, hosts, and their guests. All individuals are innocent until proven guilty. This content does not constitute legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with legal professionals for guidance.